Okay, so what happened that she's not conscious or breathing? She fell asleep.
One time she did say that if he ever found out, she would disappear.
Were you aware that approximately 5 years ago that your mother had an affair?
Yes.
Around that same date, there's a search for what did ancient cultures do to infidelity? Did you do that search?
No.
Again, you have no idea who did that search.
No.
Back in 2019, we at Law&Crime covered the trial of Todd Mullis, the man accused of murdering his wife Amy with a corn rake. From Google searches to physical evidence to a very revealing 911 phone call, we do a full recap of this unforgettable case. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. We're going to do something a little bit different for you here on Sidebar. Now, we've covered all different kinds of trials on the Law&Crime network, but these are trials you may have missed. We've been around for the last few years, so we thought, why not recap some of these trials for you that you might not know about? And right now, we're going to do a full recap of the Todd Mullis trial. If you haven't heard about this one, it's something. I remember it so well, covering it on the network a few years back. Again, it's one of those trials that just, again, stays in your memory. And this concerned the death of 39-year-old Amy Mullis out in Iowa back on November 10th, 2018. And you know what made this death so eerie was how she died. Because she was found face down on her family's farm with a corn rake protruding from her back. Actually, it was the couple's 13-year-old son that found his own mom dead in the shed. Now, police end up arresting and charging her husband with her murder, 42-year-old Todd Mullis. But of course, the question is, what evidence did they have against him? What was his defense? Well, that's what we're going to talk about. So his trial took place in 2019. And the most appropriate place to start, as I always say when we cover trials, is the opening statements. I'm going to start with the prosecution's opening statement, where you can learn more about the case against Todd Mullis.
Amy Mullis was a young and beautiful woman. Amy had so much life left to live. But that life was viciously taken from her on November 10th, 2018. Taken at the hands of this defendant. Amy was not happy. She was having an affair and she was planning on leaving the defendant. The defendant knew something was going on. Amy had previously had an affair and they had reconciled. But in July 2018, the defendant knew she was having another affair. He confronted Amy and she denied it, but that just wasn't good enough for him. There was still a lot of tension and distrust, and the defendant had to do something. See, the defendant grew up on a farm. His father's a farmer, his brothers are farmers. He became a farmer himself. Being a farmer means everything to him. He has put his life into that farm. The defendant had to find a way to keep his farm. He couldn't let Amy leave him and take his money or land or half of his farm. Amy didn't know then what you will all know by the end of this trial. That walk that she had taken hundreds of times out of her front door to the hog barn would be her last and would lead to her death. What made this day different than any other day was the defendant and his cold and calculated plan. He sent Amy to a red shed to get something, and that's where he then attacked her and killed her. He used a corn rake because he tried to make it look like a farm accident. And what did he do then? He sent his 13-year-old son to go and find his mother, who he had just slaughtered. The defendant acted like he was upset. He had to. This was his big moment, what he had been practicing and planning for months. He immediately started telling his story. He told 911 she fell on a corn rake. The defendant believed he thought of everything, but what he didn't count on was what happened next. Nobody believed his story. The doctors and law enforcement knew something just wasn't right.
Prosecution says there's a bad marriage. Amy was going to leave Todd. He carried out a plan to kill her. He wanted to make it look like an accident. Okay, it's a clear prosecution narrative. What did the defense have to say?
Amy Mullis was viciously and deliberately murdered. The issue that you will have to decide in this case is really not who did it, but whether Mr. Mullis did. Todd was going to take these pipes, and I think you'll hear them referred to as nipple feeders. They're actually water pipes with small nipples on them, so that these small pigs used to nursing off their mother will now nurse water from these pipes once they've been put in these pens. Todd was doing that. Tristan was getting these heaters that had been stored in a storage area he would bring these to each of the pens and set them out ready to be installed. Amy was there was light fixtures above these pens in walkways, each kind of doing their own thing, all within proximity of one another. At some point, Tristan noticed that Amy seemed to maybe lose her balance, comment upon her dizziness. And this is something that Todd had witnessed even before she had had the medical procedure on November 6th. His comment was, "Honey, take it easy. Why don't you go back in the house? Don't push yourself." She wanted to help. So she continued on, and there was again observation of her unsteadiness. So finally she agreed that she would stop what she was doing, still wanting to help. And each time that they'd open the door to get equipment in and out, there was a fear that they were going to run over some kittens, upset the smaller kids. So Todd says, "There's a pet carrier over in that old red shed. You can go over and get it. Just put it up by the shop on your way into the house." Okay, she leaves the hog barn. Todd and Tristan continue to work, and at some point they look out towards the house, and where you can see up by the shop where this pet carrier would have been placed by Amy per this plan, and it wasn't there. And Todd says to Tristan, "Why don't you go see what's going on and get that pet carrier if it's not up there?" Tristan goes to the shed where an awful, awful thing had occurred. Tristan yells for his father. He comes, he finds her in the shed, horribly, with this corn fork stuck in her back. Folks, again, Todd Mullis' statements about Amy falling on a fork and dying accidentally was a honest, legitimate, on-the-spot explanation or an attempt to explain what happened to her. It was wrong. She was murdered. Horribly. But I believe that you will find that not only at the end of this case that there's a reasonable doubt about Mr. Mullis' guilt, but there's no doubt at all. Thank you.
Okay, a few things. First of all, the pet carrier is important because the allegation was that Mullis had asked Amy to get the pet carrier out of the red shed where she was ultimately found dead. So was it curious that he asked her to do that? And of course, Amy was dizzy, apparently because she recently had surgery. So asking her to grab something, we'll talk about that in a second. But again, there you have it. You have the defense's narrative that she was murdered, but not by Todd Mullis. And yes, he said something off about her death, but doesn't mean he killed her. Okay. Now, one key piece of evidence that was played during the course of this case was the frantic 911 phone call placed by Todd Mullis, which, as you will see later, and I want you to pay very careful attention to it, plays a key role in what happens. Let's listen.
Okay, so what happened that she's not conscious or breathing? She fell on a fork. I took out a fork out of her.
It was an old fork sitting in somewhere, and then she was halfway out of the barn. Like, she's calling to get out, and then Tristan yelled, and I ran over there, and she's laying there.
And pulled it out of her.
I couldn't get her out of the barn. The doors were narrow, and she's not responding.
So is she bleeding?
I can't tell. When I seen it, she was face down. She is not responding. Come on.
Sir, do you feel comfortable doing CPR?
I can try. I'll try anything.
Keep doing the compressions until they can help and take over, okay?
Come on, respond.
The deputies are almost there.
Again, please keep that call in mind later. We will get to it. Now, another important piece of evidence was medical testimony. You see, Mullis originally said he thought that Amy fell on the corn rake, which wouldn't really make sense because listen to the medical examiner.
Now, at the time where you were performing this exam, Dr. Thompson, was the information that you were given was that it was alleged that Amy fell on the corn rake?
That's what I was told.
And were the injuries that you observed consistent with an accident or falling on a corn rake?
I found it very difficult to see how 4 tines could cause 6 holes in a single impact.
Now, you indicated that at some point you actually asked to see the corn rake or corn fork.
I did.
And who did you ask to see that?
I asked the sheriff's department if they had that available, and they did.
And where did you go to view that corn fork?
In the ambulance garage across from the emergency department.
And what did you do when you were observing it?
I looked at the tines size, I looked at the spacing, I looked at what appeared to be on the tines.
And did that, and how many tines were there?
There were 4 tines.
And that was inconsistent with Amy's 6 puncture wounds?
With a single impact, it was.
Okay, so again, when you look at the puncture wounds, the idea is it wouldn't make sense that this was an accident. That's why the defense moved forward with the idea, yes, she was murdered.
Hey there, everybody. So I want to thank Morgan & Morgan for sponsoring this episode of Sidebar. Always love talking about them. Now, here is the incredible thing about Morgan & Morgan, and one of the reasons why I like talking about them so much.
Hey, say something about our big wins.
You're not supposed to come on camera. The reason Morgan & Morgan, America's largest personal injury law firm, is so big, and I'm sure you can guess it, is because they win a lot. And that's
Don't forget huge verdicts.
Yeah, they've won big verdicts, $6.8 million in New York, $26 million in Philadelphia. You see, the thing about them is they don't settle for lowball insurance offers from insurance companies, which is something.
Mention that you can submit a claim from your couch at home and on your phone.
Dan, they've completely modernized the process by submitting your claim, talking to your legal team. It's all done straight from your smartphone. Again, that's something
With
that
8 clicks or less.
8 clicks or less. Yes. You can see if you have a case in just a few minutes.
Hey, 1,000 lawyers. We have over 1,000 lawyers.
All right.
Now.
You know what, Dan? If you really think you can do better, maybe you should just do it yourself.
What Jesse was getting at is if you've ever been injured in an accident, you can check out Morgan & Morgan. You can submit a claim in 8 clicks or less. To start your claim, just visit forthepeople.com/LC sidebar.
You came a little too close to me. It hurt me a little bit. I'm probably actually going to have to hire you guys now, but that was well said. That was well said.
Now, it's important to establish what the motive is here. Why would Todd Mullis kill Amy? Of course, motive, not an element of a crime. Prosecutors don't have to prove motive, but I will tell you, it is important to sell a story to the jury, right? And here, this is where you hear witnesses talk about the troubled marriage between Amy and Todd and how Amy had been unfaithful to Todd years in the past, that they went to counseling. But then she was having apparently a second affair in 2018, and the idea was he was controlling, that he was nervous, that he would lose everything in a divorce. That was the allegation put forward by the prosecution. So to give you a better idea of this, here is Amy's friend Terry Stainer. And you're also going to hear from Jerry Frazier. This is the man who is having an affair with Amy.
Do you know how long Amy worked at Manchester Hospital?
Amy worked there until, I'm thinking, approximately 5 or 6 years ago.
And do you know why she left?
She left because it was kind of a deal she made with her husband after she had her first affair, that she needed to be home and not be in that environment with a lot of other people. It took Todd a very long time. I don't think he ever really trusted Amy again. That was very hard for her. A lot of times when we were together, she would, say, how long do I have to pay for this mistake? It was very regulated who she could do things with. I was on, it was kind of a joke, the approved friend list that could actually do things with Amy. She was timed when she left home and when she got back, and it was very carefully watched.
What, if anything, did Amy tell you about her relationship with Todd when you would be with her?
She really didn't say much. We didn't talk about relationships much, other than I know she wasn't happy.
Did she tell you how Todd treated her?
She made different notes, or not notes, but said she felt like a slave or a hostage around there.
Now, did Amy ever tell you whether or not she was planning on leaving Todd?
She said she was wanting to.
Did you and Amy ever have any conversations about what Todd would do if he found out she was having an affair?
One time she did say that if he ever found out, she would disappear.
Were you afraid about Todd finding out about your affair?
Yes.
Okay, so the motive makes sense. We see that kind of motive in a lot of different cases, but I will tell you, in this case, the strongest evidence against Todd Mullis wasn't necessarily just this idea of the motive, but it was the Google searches, the infamous Google searches, which we talk about in so many cases. So law enforcement collect Mullis's iPad and they discover searches that are connected to the Google account that Mullis had used on his iPad.
I noticed on that search, when I hit that search bar to see the history that's on the device, I seen organs of the body was searched.
And when was that searched?
That was 4 days prior to the homicide.
Is there a site that was visited that you felt was relevant to this investigation?
Yes, so after that, there's another search, same date, January 5th, 2018, at 2:54 in the morning. This is a visited site. So the visited site was truthaboutdeception.com, cheating and infidelity, stats about infidelity, cheating-wife.
Was there another visited site?
Yes, so it was 6 traits almost every cheating woman has. So on January 5th, 2018 at 3:18, it was searched for what did ancient cultures do to infidelity.
And after that, was there another search?
Yeah, search for did ancient cultures kill adulterers.
Yeah, that's tough. That's tough. Not great searches to be linked to the man accused of killing his wife, but that was not even the most memorable part of this trial. I'm going to talk to you about what was a very, very difficult moment. And that was when Tristan, the couple's son, testified in court. And I want you to think about this. He is testifying in the trial of his father, accused of murdering his mother. He's just a boy, 14 years old. Let's hear what he had to say about that day and his observations of the relationship.
So, Tristan, did your dad say anything to your mom or tell her to do something?
Yes.
What did he say?
He said if you want to help out, it would mean a lot to us if you would go get the pet cage that was in a barn.
And is that also referred to as like a pet carrier?
Yes.
And do you know where that pet carrier was located?
Yes.
Where was it located?
In the red shed, as we call it.
And this carrier, it's kind of big, correct?
Yes.
And what would you approximate? Well, could you give us an approximation of how much you think that pet carrier weighs?
Probably maybe 15, 18 pounds. I'm not sure.
And your dad asked your mom to get that after she appeared to be dizzy.
Yes.
Tristan, during that deposition, you estimated that you were out of your dad's sight for approximately 1 minute and 40 seconds.
Yes.
Was that accurate when you gave that testimony?
No.
After the deposition, did you meet with your attorney and tell him that that was not accurate?
Yes.
Now, Tristan, after approximately that hour, hour and a half that you said you were working in the hog barn, did your dad say or tell you to do anything?
Yes.
What did he say to you?
He just said, since we did not see the pet carrier, or whatever you want to call it, in front of the shop or out on the in front of the barn, we just assumed that, maybe it was too heavy or she couldn't get it, or because she was on a weight restriction. So we just thought that, maybe it was just, one of those things where you just can't do it yourself. So he just told me to get it myself.
Did you then walk to the red shed or red barn?
Yes.
At that point, was anybody else on the farm?
No.
Where did you go then?
I went to the barn.
What did you see when you walked in?
My mom.
And where was your mom at?
She was just inside the door.
And what position was she in?
She was kind of on her hands and knees, face down.
What did you do?
I yelled for my dad.
Did you see anything that was protruding or sticking out of your mom's body?
Yes.
What did you see?
Corn rake.
And would it be fair to say that this was a very traumatic experience for you?
Yes.
Now, you spoke to police, sheriff, that day at the hospital, right?
Yes.
And they asked you a little bit about what happened that day.
Yes.
And you told them at that time that you were with your dad the whole time.
Yes.
But what you're telling us today and what you told us at the deposition is that there was a period of time that you were not with your dad.
Yes.
Did you know kind of a lot about your mom and dad's relationship?
Yeah.
Were you aware that approximately 5 years ago that your mother had an affair?
Yes.
In about the summer to fall of 2018, before your mother's death, do you remember a time when you came home from school and your mom was really upset?
Yes.
And did you then have a conversation with your dad?
Yes.
Was it anybody besides you and your dad that day?
No.
And what, if anything, did your dad say to you during that conversation?
He just said that, Mom was upset today and we got in an argument and it was just about what was going on and she just kind of got upset about it.
Well, when you say what was going on, your dad actually told you that your mom was talking to another man.
Yes.
So he talks about how his father didn't seem too happy with his mom, how he was suspicious of her, talks about how he didn't observe his dad for a period of time on the day of his mom's killing. And of course, you hear prosecutors trying to explain away some of his inconsistent statements and chalking it up to the trauma of that day, which could be completely understandable. And yes, wouldn't it be strange for Todd Mullis to ask Amy to go get the pet carrier when she had just had surgery a few days earlier? And by the way, there was testimony that she was dizzy, that she wasn't feeling well. So was this a ruse to get her alone so that Mullis could kill her? That's an allegation. And now I want you to focus a bit more on not only what Todd Mullis did, but what he said. So his police interview was played in court where he talks about confronting Amy and Jerry about this affair. And you're going to hear the investigator trying to get Mullis to open up.
Did Jerry deny having an affair with Amy? He said he denied it. Yes, he denied it. He just said, hey, there's nothing wrong. No relationship, no sex, no. What about Amy? Did she deny it? She denied it. Well, she just said, it's just, no, there's no thanks. Just, did you believe around? Yeah, I did. And there was no way I thought that you were going to let things go down this way. She was not going to take all that from you. Not cheating on you twice, and then trying to take your kids, and then trying to take the farm. I know you care about Amy. I know you love Amy. This isn't a situation I love her with all my heart. Yeah, you do. And that's how things happen like this. You don't hurt Amy because you don't love her. You hurt her because you love her too much. You hurt her because you love her so much and she doesn't return that love. In fact, she betrays you. And that's why this happens.
So you hurt her because you love her, you care about her, and she's not reciprocating. She is not returning it back. Well, that wouldn't be the only time that we hear from Todd Mullis. No. One of the most defining points of this trial is when Todd Mullis, the defendant himself, took the stand.
We've heard a lot of testimony about Amy having an affair. You recall that?
Yes.
And after you learned of that situation, what did you and Amy do about it?
Well, basically, after we, I discovered it, we decided, immediately that she wanted to make it, quit her affair, go to counseling. She was sorry, and then wholeheartedly work it out.
It's been talked about or mentioned by a couple witnesses that Amy complained to them that you were keeping too close of control or too close of contact with her when she was not with you. Did she ever complain to you about that?
No, she never complained to me about it. It was actually her idea almost all the time if she went to town, she would just say, hey, headed to town, got to stop at, this place, and this place. I don't, just depended on where she was going. And it was just real simple. Here's where I'm at. Shouldn't take long.
Did you force her to quit the hospital?
No, I did not.
She wanted to.
She requested it, yes.
After the counseling that you jointly sought, she was now an at-home mom. How would you describe her feeling about that? In other words, did she seem comfortable with that?
She seemed overwhelmingly happy.
You were present when Deputy Hemseth testified that about certain searches about cheating spouses or cheating wives, that kind of thing. Did you do those searches?
No, I did not.
Did you know? Do you know who did?
I have no idea who looked that up.
Did you and Amy ever discuss topics like that between the two of you?
If there was a movie or something, we might have talked about a little bit of something like that, but not extensively, no.
Did the two of you enjoy together history programs?
Yes, we watched History Channel a lot.
Did that ever lead to a follow-up search by either one of you?
Yes, quite often, actually.
Did you and Amy both enjoy history of Native American and other Indian populations?
Yes, we both would watch a show and look stuff up.
What does he do? He refutes the narrative that he was mad and controlling and possessive. He provided an alternative explanation for the Google searches. And from there, of course, he had to address Amy's death.
Did you ever leave the barn?
No, I did not.
About how long did you and Tristan work there before you decided to do something different or something else developed?
We worked in there, I'd say a good hour, if not a little more.
What happened when you went outside?
I had just stepped out for a second, and Tristan yelled.
What did you see when you stepped in through that door?
Well, when I stepped in, I initially looked at Tristan, and I looked over, and I seen Amy hunched up, face down, laying next to the door, leaning against the door.
Did she have this corn fork stuck in her?
Yeah.
What did you do?
I more or less just dove down by her. I put my head down. I was like, Amy. I was yelling at her, trying to get her attention. I didn't know what to think. I was just looking at her, and I picked her head up a little bit, and I was There's just nothing. It was no response. I stated that you want me to confess to something I did not do. And in my mind, that's saying I did not do that.
Was he giving you much of a chance to explain things?
Not at all. I tried several times and he wouldn't give me a chance to say 2 words.
Todd, did you ambush your wife Amy in that shed that day and brutally beat her and chop her up with that corn fork?
No, I did not.
Do you know who did?
I have no idea.
Says he's innocent. He didn't kill Amy. He wasn't given a chance to explain himself. Investigators immediately targeted him. Okay. Now, let's hear what prosecutors did, because you know they have an opportunity to cross-examine the defendant, and they certainly cross-examined Mr. Mullis. And what they're trying to show here is just how suspicious and curious his behavior and statements were, including the idea that someone else, a complete stranger, would just kill Amy Mullis. And you remember when I said to pay careful attention to Mullis's 911 phone call? It makes a return.
And you see this corn rake sticking out of her.
Yes.
You have your phone on you.
Yes.
You don't call 911 right away.
No.
You immediately try to pick her up.
No. I looked and I turned her face towards me to see if she was breathing or alive. And I was asking her name, Amy.
Then she's not responsive at all.
No.
And that rake is still sticking out of her.
Yes.
Later that same day, John Turbot is at your house with the other agents and officers, and they're executing search warrants, right?
Yes.
And he asks you to take him around again to kind of show him, to go through your story, or what happened, right?
He has to see buildings, yes.
And again, he says to you, Todd, this was a homicide, and you don't respond at all. Do you?
No.
You're still in shock. Was that be fair to say?
I was in shock and I didn't, yeah.
And he even says the word to you, we want justice for Amy. Do you remember him saying that to you?
No.
Oh, you don't remember that. And you at no point through that conversation that day when they're executing the search warrants say anything about any suspects? Or I'm sorry, give them any ideas of who might come onto your property and kill Amy.
I don't remember them asking me that. No, they wanted to blame me.
At no point did you, during your interview with John Turbot, did you tell him anybody that you think would maybe want to kill Amy?
No.
And as you sit here today, you don't know who would possibly want to do this to Amy.
No.
Now, Todd, here I'm gonna play you the part where you're doing the chest compressions, and I'm just gonna ask that you listen in between the chest compressions, okay? Now, Todd, did you just hear that whisper at the end of that?
Yes.
And what did you whisper?
I couldn't hear it.
Okay, I'm gonna play it again. Todd, do you whisper cheating right there?
No.
So you don't remember what you whispered?
No.
Okay, I'm gonna play another clip for you. Do you know what you whispered there?
No.
Did you hear that? So I'm gonna play that part one more time. The first clip is 6:53 of that second tape, and this second one is right at 0700. Just try to listen really closely. I just wanna know if you remember what you said. Right there, do you say, go to hell, cheating?
No.
So you don't hear that?
No.
You didn't hear at 6:53 cheating. You didn't hear that.
I didn't hear that word.
And it's right at that, after you hear a ping, you don't hear go to hell, cheating.
No.
Well, that was a moment for sure. And I know a lot of us were listening back to that 911 phone call and trying to see, did he really just say that? And the big theme here is that no one else would have or could have committed the murder under those circumstances other than Todd Mullis. That his actions don't make sense. That the motive is crystal clear. Well, what did the jury decide?
We, the jury, find the defendant, Todd Michael Mullis, guilty of the crime of murder in the first degree.
Yep, guilty after over 7 hours of deliberations. But that wasn't the last time that we heard from Todd Mullis. No, during his sentencing, he had some parting words.
I did not do this. This is supposed to be America where you have a fair chance of proving your innocence. But you shouldn't have to prove your innocence. Instead of the other way around, I thought it was guilty until, or not, innocent until proven guilty. I feel this is the other way around. And I was a faithful and loving husband, and I never did this.
But despite all that, a jury found Todd Mullis guilty. He was convicted. He was officially sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. But that is not quite the end of the story. No. Todd Mullis is fighting for a new trial. In fact, in one of his filings, he writes, "There exists evidence of material facts not previously presented and heard that requires vacation of the conviction," meaning it should be thrown out. And he also said his defense counsel at trial didn't put forward the defense he wanted. He says he wanted to argue that Amy's death was an accident, that she wasn't killed by anybody. And by the way, you could see why he would want to say that, considering there really were no other credible alternative suspects. Then again, would accident really be a good defense? We talked about the puncture wounds versus the 4 prongs of the corn rake. That could be very hard to reconcile. So at the time of this recording, we will see how this shakes up and whether or not we will ever see the Todd Mullis trial 2.0. That's all we have for you right now here on Sidebar, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. And as always, please subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Jesse Weber. I'll speak to you next time.